They say a scream can shatter glass. But what about a silence so deep it shatters hearts? In a town where everyone thought they knew each other's pain, a silent little girl carried a secret stronger than any scream. She had lost her family, her words, her world. All she had left was a broken dog, and a bond that no fire, no bully, no cruel whisper could break. When the world pushed her to her knees, she didn't rise with fists or shouts. She rose with a whisper so powerful it made the world stop breathing.
She never spoke a word, not since the fire that took everything. But when a boy kicked her only friend, a battered German shepherd who never left her side, something inside her shattered. And in front of a crowd that had always looked right through her, this silent little girl did something that stunned the entire world. What followed was more than a viral moment. It was a journey of pain, healing, and the unbreakable bond between a girl who'd lost her voice and a dog who gave it back. This is the story of a whisper that roared louder than hate, and a love that healed far beyond one small town. Before we begin, like this video and let us know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? In a town where everybody knows everybody and secrets still echo through pine trees, there lived a little girl named Lena Whitmore who hadn't spoken a single word in over a year. Not a whisper, not a hum, nothing. The silence wasn't just strange. It was haunting. Most folks chalked it up to the fire, the one that took her parents, her home, and every ounce of safety she once knew. After that, Lena moved in with Eli Ramsey, a widowed carpenter whose grief lived behind his tired eyes and under his calloused hands. He was a man who fixed things, built things, but even he knew some things were just too broken to repair. And at first, Lena seemed like one of them. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat, drawing, always drawing. Dark lines on paper that looked like smoke and shadows. Eli didn't push. He didn't have the energy for therapy appointments or awkward small talk. He made her warm meals, fixed the creaky stairs, and let her exist in the silence she clung to. It was a quiet house, and most days it felt like two ghosts just circling each other. But then came the thunderstorm. It rolled in like an old enemy, lightning cracking through the sky, wind howling through the shutters. Eli was out in the shed gathering tools when he heard the softest sound beneath the porch, a whimper. He assumed it was the wind until he leaned down and saw a pair of terrified eyes glowing in the dark. A German shepherd, ribs showing, limping, soaked to the bone and shaking like a leaf. No tag, no collar, just survival and pain in dog form. Eli opened the screen door, shaking his head. "Well, ain't this just my luck?" He called for Lena. No answer. Again, no surprise. But the second she saw the dog, her feet moved faster than Eli had ever seen. She didn't hesitate, walked straight into the rain, dropped to her knees, and wrapped her arms around the trembling animal like she'd known him her whole life. No words, just that silent, desperate hug. And Eli, he knew. This wasn't just a stray. This was her stray. Scout. That's the name she wrote on the first bowl of food she slid across the floor. All capitals, uneven letters, but clear. From that day forward, Scout slept outside Lena's bedroom door, followed her everywhere, and waited patiently by the table every mealtime. He even sat beside her as she drew, like he understood every line. Slowly, things changed. Lena stopped flinching at loud sounds. She began walking without watching over her shoulder. And when Scout barked at shadows, she smiled like he was chasing off her nightmares. Eli noticed more than he let on. He saw how her drawings changed. No more smoke and shadows. Now there were trees, a girl, and always, a dog beside her. Still not a word from Lena, not a single sound. But Eli swore the silence didn't feel so heavy anymore. And maybe that's what love looks like when words fail. A broken man, a silent girl, and a scarred dog just trying to breathe in a world that nearly forgot them. But something was stirring beneath the surface. Lena wasn't just healing. She was watching. And when the world dared to take away the one good thing she'd let in, she would make sure it never forgot what she had to say. Lena didn't need words to make her presence known anymore. She had Scout, and Scout had her. The pair were practically glued at the hip, more like two halves of one soul than a girl and her dog. Wherever Lena went, Scout followed. And when Scout growled, Lena knew when to stay still. It was like they spoke in a language no one else could hear. A silent bond stitched together by scars, quiet walks, and mutual understanding of what it feels like to be forgotten. But of course, small towns don't stay silent for long. People noticed. Kids whispered. Adults made polite observations behind guarded smiles. You know the kind. That's the Whitmore girl, right? Poor thing. Still not talking? She's got that dog now, though. Maybe that's good. Maybe. But not everyone is kind. Enter Carter Dunn. 13, angry, and insecure in the way only a kid raised on scrap metal and slammed doors can be. His dad ran the local junkyard. Carter ran his mouth. The kind of boy who sensed weakness like blood in water. And Lena, mute, mysterious, always walking with that ugly stray, became his favorite target. First, it was barking sounds behind her back. Then pebbles thrown when Scout wasn't looking. A snapped pencil in art class. The usual cruel cocktail of boredom and bitterness. But Lena never flinched. Not once. Scout, however, wasn't so forgiving. Every time Carter got too close, Scout would step in. Low growl. Eyes locked. Message received. The only reason Carter never got bit was because Lena would place a hand on Scout's fur. Just one touch and he'd fall silent again. She was the leash and the leash was love. Still, one afternoon after school, the line was crossed. Lena found Scout waiting for her behind the gym with dried blood behind his ear. No one saw it happen. No teacher stepped in. Just Scout, sitting there, tail barely wagging, wounded but loyal. Lena didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she sat beside him in the dirt, picked up a stick, and started drawing. One long stroke. Then another, a girl, tiny and determined. A leash that turned into a bolt of lightning. And a shadow cowering behind her. Eli noticed the scratch that night. Scout didn't flinch as he cleaned the wound. He'll be all right, Eli muttered. Stupid kid. But Lena wasn't listening. She was watching. Something had shifted inside her. Not broken. Not snapped. Shifted. Her silence didn't feel small anymore. It felt sharp. Heavy. Like the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Eli tried to report the incident, of course. But with no witnesses, no confession, and a local family with roots in town, there wasn't much the school could do. Just another shrug. Another file on a desk. Another reason to stay quiet. But Lena wasn't broken anymore. She was waiting, watching, learning when the world listens. And when it turns away. And when the moment finally came, when someone would hurt the only thing she trusted in front of a crowd, Lena wouldn't just find her voice. She'd make sure the whole world heard it. Small towns love a good tradition. The annual Miller County Spring Fair was practically gospel, complete with lemonade stands, Ferris wheels, pie-eating contests, and more gossip per square foot than a beauty salon. Lena had never gone before. Too many people, too much noise, too many eyes. But this year was different. Eli practically begged her to come out, said it'd be good for her. And Scout? He was practically already in the truck before Lena could grab her coat. It was the first time in a long time that Lena looked light. She wore a faded blue hoodie and a smile that wasn't forced. Scout wore a red bandana Lena had stitched herself. Crooked, sure, but proudly worn. They walked the fairgrounds like quiet royalty. No words. Just her hand occasionally brushing over Scout's back as he trotted beside her. People noticed. Some smiled. A few whispered. And Carter Dunn? He seethed. Carter had a chip on his shoulder that morning and a pocket full of something to prove. His friends dared him. Go mess with the mutt. Let's see if she cries. Classic small-town punk energy. But Carter was past the teasing stage. He wanted a reaction. Something real. And then he did the unthinkable. Right there in front of the lemonade stand, in front of maybe 30 people, mothers, kids, teachers, he marched up and kicked Scout. Hard. Right in the ribs. The German Shepherd yelped and collapsed sideways. The sound stopped the world. Laughter died mid-air. Lena froze. It was like the sky blinked. Lena ran to Scout, fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. The boy who'd never left her side now lay gasping for breath. And then something shattered. She stood, fists clenched, eyes locked on Carter. Her lips trembled. And then, like thunder slipping through the crack in a dam, she spoke. "Don't you ever touch him again." 7 words. Not loud, not polished, but they dropped like a grenade in the middle of the fairgrounds. Everyone froze. Eli, just arriving with a bag of popcorn, dropped it in shock. A few people gasped. One mom actually started crying. And Carter? He backed up like he'd been punched. Phones were already out, record buttons glowing. In less than 2 hours, the clip hit social media. By midnight, it had 2 million views. By morning, the headlines read, "Mute girl speaks to defend her dog." Crowd silenced. The comments flooded in. Thousands of them. "I'm sobbing. That's the bravest kid I've ever seen. Protect them at all costs." But behind all that noise, behind the viral wave, was a girl clutching her dog, whispering apologies into his fur, and a storm quietly building inside her. This wasn't a happy ending. This was just the beginning of a girl the world thought was broken, and the bond that made her whole again. And trust me, the world hadn't seen anything yet. By sunrise, Lena wasn't just a kid from Miller County anymore. She was the kid. The internet had latched on like it always does when something raw and real breaks through the scroll. That video, the one with the silent girl who found her voice to protect her dog, it exploded. Fast. Celebrities were retweeting it. "This broke me. Protect them." Who's cutting onions? It didn't take long before the news vans started crawling up the gravel road toward Eli's house like metal ants. And Lena? She didn't say much after that day, not because she was afraid, but because her words weren't something she handed out lightly. Scout was still sore, his ribs tender, but alive and tail wagging. He stuck close to Lena like a shadow with fur. She spent that first viral day curled up beside him, sketchbook in hand, drawing an image of herself standing in front of a microphone with Scout beside her. His paw on the mic, like they were doing it together. Eli wasn't thrilled about the media circus, of course. He half-seriously considered nailing boards to the windows. "They'll move on," he muttered over coffee. But they didn't, because Lena did something no PR team could fabricate. She felt real. And when she finally spoke again, it wasn't to a camera. It was to the people. She wrote a letter. With Eli's help, Lena typed it and posted it on a new page her teacher helped her create. It read, "I didn't talk because nothing felt safe. Scout made me feel safe. He's not just my dog. He's the reason I remembered how to be brave." The letter spread like wildfire, not just because it was heartfelt, but because it said what so many people were too scared to say. That sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's survival. And love? Love is what cracks it open again. The messages came flooding in. Kids with speech disorders, teens with PTSD, war veterans, foster kids, people who hadn't spoken to anyone in years, all writing Lena, all telling her, "You gave me hope. You reminded me I'm not broken. Your voice became mine." It was bigger than a headline now. It was a movement. A local mom started a GoFundMe without even asking. "Let's get Scout proper vet care and send this brave girl to a special arts program." The goal was $5,000. It crossed $50,000 by day 3. But not everyone was cheering. Because, of course, Carter's dad had to ruin the moment. Filed a formal complaint to the school board, claiming Lena's outburst defamed his son and caused emotional damage. It was absurd. And yet, in a town like this, the rules are murky and the lines are old. Now there was talk of a hearing, a school board meeting, whether Lena would be disciplined for causing a disruption. A disruption, as if standing up for a dog who got kicked was somehow the problem. Eli was furious. Lena? She didn't panic. She just kept drawing. One night, she handed Eli a new picture. Scout standing tall, eyes forward, and behind him, a lion. It wasn't over. Not even close. Because the world may have finally heard her. But now, Lena would have to prove that one moment wasn't a fluke. That her silence held more strength than all the noise Carter's family could throw her way. And what happened next? It didn't just shake their town. It reminded everyone what courage really looks like. You'd think a viral video that made the whole country cry would buy a kid some peace. But no. In Miller County, apparently, defending your dog from a bully now meant sitting in front of a bunch of adults in folding chairs while someone read out phrases like disruption of educational environment with a straight face. Welcome to the school board hearing where common sense goes to retire. Lena didn't say a word the entire morning leading up to it. But she wasn't hiding either. She dressed herself, chose a hoodie with Scout's paw print stitched on the chest. When Eli asked if she was scared, she simply looked at him and slipped a drawing into his jacket pocket. He pulled it out in the car. It was Scout again. Same bandana, same eyes. But this time he was standing between Lena and a black cloud that looked suspiciously like Carter. Behind Scout, Lena stood tall, holding a torch. Message received. They walked into the gym like they owned the place. Scout wasn't allowed in, but he waited outside the doors like a seasoned bodyguard. And inside, it was standing room only. Kids, parents, teachers, even the mailman. Some held signs. One read, "Her voice saved us." Another, "Scout is our hero." The energy, electric. Carter sat 2 rows away, sulking next to his father, who looked like he'd just bit into a lemon. He made some speech about Lena causing emotional trauma to his boy, claimed Carter hadn't been sleeping, that the video made him the target. Sure, buddy. Kick a dog in front of 30 people and you're the victim? Finally, they asked Lena to speak. She stood. No one expected her to. She didn't need to, but she did. She walked slowly to the front, turned to the board, and looked every member in the eye. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it had weight. They can kick him, but I won't let them break him. Or me. Boom. The room was dead silent. You could hear chairs creak, breaths being held. Even Carter looked away. The board deliberated for all of 8 minutes. No punishment, no warning. Lena was free to return to school. Carter, however, was recommended for mandatory counseling and community service. And for the first time ever, the town's golden junkyard prince didn't get off easy. But as Lena walked out of the building, Scout leapt up to greet her, and that's when she saw it. Spray painted on the brick wall just outside the school. Mute freak. 3 words. Bright red. Big enough to burn. Eli was furious. He wanted names, consequences, arrests. But Lena, she just stared at it. Not with fear. Not even with sadness. Just that same quiet she carried since day one. She knelt, took Scout's head in her hands, and whispered something only he heard. Then she turned and walked home. Because Lena had already learned something the town hadn't. You can't silence someone who's already survived fire. You can't shame someone who's chosen to speak. And when your words come from a place of love, they don't just echo, they build. This wasn't defeat. It was a warning. The world had given Lena her voice back. Now it had to live with what she was going to do with it. It had been a weird week. The town was still buzzing from the hearing. The mural of Mute Freak was power washed clean by 3 PTA moms before the next sunrise. And Scout had officially been banned from 3 local bakeries for emotional disturbance, which was ironic because he was calmer than most of the actual customers. Still, something had shifted. The story was no longer just about what happened at the fair. It was about what came next. And what came next arrived in the mailbox on a quiet Thursday morning, tucked between a stack of coupons and a late electric bill. A plain envelope, no return address, just Lena's name written carefully in bold block letters. Inside was a photo, old, creased, but powerful. A man in uniform standing tall beside a German shepherd, both looking straight into the lens like they could see through it. The note underneath was short, handwritten. Your voice is louder than most speeches I've ever heard. My dog saved my life when I couldn't speak either. Thank you for reminding the world. It was signed Walt Delaney, U.S. Army, retired. Lena stared at the letter for a long time. She didn't say a word, but when she finally looked up at Eli, her eyes said everything. This man didn't know her, never met her, but somehow he understood. Scout nudged her elbow, like even he knew this moment was important. She asked Eli to help her write back. And that started something nobody expected. She wrote Walt. Then she wrote back to a little girl in Kansas who sent a crayon drawing of her cat hugging a teddy bear. Then a boy in Oregon who stuttered and said Lena gave him courage to read out loud in class. Then a veteran in Arizona who said he hadn't opened up in years, until he saw her video. And Eli? He helped her set up a little corner of the internet called Scout's Voice. It wasn't fancy. Just a simple blog where Lena posted her drawings, her letters, and stories from people who knew what it meant to be silent in a world that doesn't stop talking. Every post ended the same way. You're not alone. You're never alone if someone hears you. The blog took off. Quietly. Organically. It wasn't viral. It was real. Teachers shared it in classrooms. Therapists printed out the drawings. Animal shelters linked it on their adoption pages. It wasn't about fame anymore. Lena didn't want attention. She wanted connection. And that's exactly what she got. Scout became a local legend. The fire department gave him a little honorary badge. A bakery made dog-friendly cookies in his name. One of Lena's drawings, Scout with a cape, ended up framed inside the school library. The same school where not long ago, someone had painted those 3 awful words. But despite the growing love, there were still whispers. People who rolled their eyes, called it a phase, said, "She's just milking sympathy." Those voices were quieter now. But they were there, always are. Still, Lena didn't flinch, because Scout hadn't just helped her speak. He taught her what to listen to and what to leave behind. And just when it seemed like things were finally settling, life, of course, threw another match into the story. Only this time, the fire wasn't a metaphor. And what Lena did next would change everything. You'd think after everything, viral fame, emotional courtrooms, and handwritten letters from Army veterans, Lena and Scout would finally catch a break. But nope, the universe wasn't done testing them just yet. And this next test didn't come with cameras or applause. Came with smoke. It was supposed to be a normal day. One of those crisp spring afternoons where the air smells like pine and the sun feels like a soft handshake. Lena and Scout had wandered off to their usual walking trail near Lake Crest, the one with the mossy rocks and the old tree stump that looked like a dragon's face. Eli wasn't worried. They knew the path like the back of their hands, or paws. But when evening came and they hadn't returned, something felt wrong. Eli tried not to panic. First, maybe they stopped to rest. Maybe Scout found a squirrel worth interrogating. But when the sun dipped below the trees and the sky turned from gold to gray, he grabbed his truck keys and didn't even bother to finish lacing his boots. He drove those winding back roads with his headlights cutting through the forest like swords. Nothing. Not a bark. Not a whisper. But then he heard it. A bark. Broken. Ragged. But familiar. And then came the smell. Smoke. Started small. Just a crackle in the underbrush. But it had caught dry pine needles and was now creeping through the trees like it had a mission. And in the middle of it all, Eli found her. Lena. Under a fallen branch. Her ankle pinned, face streaked with dirt and sweat. Scout was beside her, limping, singed, and bleeding from one leg. But he hadn't moved. Not for hours. He had barked, scratched, circled, refused to leave her side. Eli didn't ask questions. He hoisted the branch, scooped her up, and shouted at Scout to follow. The dog stood, stumbled, and then kept going. Through the trees. Through the smoke, toward the sound of sirens finally catching up. By the time they made it to the road, the fire trucks were arriving. Water cannons hissed, radios buzzed, but Lena only had eyes for Scout. She gripped his fur so tightly Eli thought she might never let go. "He stayed," she whispered, through chapped lips and smoke-stained breath. "He didn't run." That night, the story broke again. Young girl trapped in forest fire. Dog stays to shield her. But this wasn't a viral moment anymore. This was something else. Something deeper. Lena had faced death again. And this time, it didn't take her voice, it confirmed it. At the hospital, Scout lay curled beside her bed. Bandaged. Exhausted. But alive. Eli brought her a cup of Jell-O and tried to crack a joke. "This dog's gonna give me a heart attack." Lena just smiled. And then, the words that stayed with him forever. "We saved each other, Didn't we? Eli nodded. Yeah, kid. I think you saved us all. And maybe that was the truth no one expected from this whole saga. That in a world obsessed with who speaks the loudest, the ones who barely whisper often change the most lives. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay, even when the fire comes. But Lena's story wasn't over yet. There was one more chapter, one more moment that would remind the world what true strength really looks like. Healing doesn't happen in straight lines. It zigzags, it stumbles, it loops back when you least expect it. But Lena, she didn't just heal, she evolved. After the fire, after the rescue, after the national headlines gave way to other stories and other screens, Lena settled back into the rhythm of being a kid who once whispered to a dog and made the world lean in to listen. Her ankle still twinged sometimes. Scout's fur never grew back fully over the patch that had been scorched. But neither of them wore those scars like injuries. They wore them like badges. A few weeks later, Lena got an invitation. A local author was working on a children's book collection, true stories of real kids showing real bravery. They wanted Lena to write her chapter. Not a ghostwriter, not a narrator, her. And she said yes without even looking at Eli. She called it, "The Day the Sky Caught Fire, and My Dog Didn't Leave." Simple, honest, devastatingly perfect. When the book launched at the public library downtown, the place was packed. Folding chairs spilled into the aisles. Scout wore his red bandana and a brand new service vest donated by a local vet. It said, "Guardian of Lena." He stood beside her the entire time like a bodyguard with a PhD in loyalty. Then it happened. Lena walked to the podium, alone this time, held her printed chapter in both hands and read it. Out loud. Every word. No tremble. No pause. Just pure, steady grace. The same girl who once couldn't say her name now told a room full of strangers about trauma, survival, and the dog who stayed when no one else could. When she finished, the room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. There was a long pause, thick with tears, held breaths, and that indescribable silence that only shows up when something honest has just split everyone wide open. Then came the applause. Not loud, just true. Eli stood in the back, pretending his eyes were watering because of allergies. He never said much about his feelings, but the way he looked at Lena that night said everything. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Scout's voice, the little blog they started in their living room, had grown into something much bigger. Not viral, not flashy, just powerful. Letters poured in weekly, drawings from kids, messages from shelters. One girl even started her own blog called Whiskers Speak, about her therapy cat. Lena wrote back to every single one. It was never about becoming famous. It was about becoming seen. And that's the thing most people missed when they looked at her. They saw the silence and assumed absence. But Lena was never empty. She was watching, waiting, listening for someone worth trusting again. Scout was that someone. And in saving him, she'd unknowingly saved herself. In loving him, she learned how to speak. And in speaking, she gave others the courage to step into their own voice. One evening, while watching the sun go down over the lake, Lena leaned against Eli and said, "You think Scout knows everything that happened?" Eli smiled. "Oh, he knows. He just doesn't care about the headlines. He only cares about you. And maybe that's all we really need. One soul that stays. One heart that listens. One bond that reminds us we're still here. Still worth loving. Still capable of roaring after the silence." Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about a girl who found her voice. It was about a world that finally listened. And the dog who made sure it never forgot.